The internet is the most incredible resource that humanity's ever created, and I include the printing press, probably all religious texts, everything. The internet has enabled more, and what they thought it was at the time versus what it's become is incredible.
I've been interested in computer networking for as long as I can remember, and also as interested in naming in computing systems. And I found that there were a number of other networks that were growing and thriving in Canada and around the world for that matter. I saw that the individuals on these different networks could communicate with each other on the same network, but not very well with somebody on a different network. So a physicist at UBC could communicate with a physicist at CERN more easily than the physicist at UBC could communicate with a computer scientist at UBC. But I recognized that one of the issues would be to try to come up with a common naming scheme. And I saw the internet naming scheme called the Domain Name System be created. And I thought that this was a good possible base for us in Canada to try to bring together these users of these different networks. So I looked into what was possible, and it turned out that in those early days, it was fairly straightforward to go to the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority and ask for authority and responsibility for a new top-level domain, and that's what I did.
.ca was originally founded by a man named John Demko. John and a few other volunteers created and ran the .ca for more than a decade before the internet really started to commercialize and take off.
I can speak initially to how we used to register a domain. You sent an email to John Demko and you said, hey, it was a form he'd kind of produced just in text, and you filled out this form in an email and sent it to him, and he'd go through it, and it was often a week backlog he was dealing with, and he'd send it back with any mistakes you made, and then you'd have to resubmit, or he'd send it back and say, okay, your domain's registered. But it was all by email, it was all low tech.
Those were the early days of the internet. Very, very few people really understood what the internet was and its potential. There was an American-based organization that was created at the time called ICANN. Its role was to set up this internet network. Everybody was using the .com as the mean of communication. We thought early in the days that somebody should worry about who's going to use the .ca, and we sure as hell didn't want California to take it.
We needed CIRA because .ca was an important resource, and Canadians were getting online more and more. John was just so far backed up. I mean, at one point he was working 8 hours a day on this side hustle of his no one really realized.
At that point, John realized that in order to do justice to the .ca, a new structure was going to have to be created to operate it. And he and the internet community at the time, civil society, business operators, end users, the government, all came together to determine what would be the best way to run the .ca going forward. And that group came together and came to consensus that a special purpose operator or organization should be created just to run the .ca.
CIRA, the Canadian Internet Registration Authority, was conceived to be the operator of the .ca domain name. That name was chosen very carefully. It's not just for words that are kind of thrown together. Every one of those words to me had an important aspect. We wanted it to be Canadian. We wanted it to be internet oriented. We wanted the organization to concentrate on its registration activities. And we wanted it to be perceived as authoritative.
One of the first things we realized as we were going through the process of creating it was that .ca is really a public trust. I mean, it's an asset of Canadians that Canadians should control. It should be uniquely Canadian. With this public trust, we were, trying to take care of and move forward in a way that wouldn't be government controlled. It would be controlled by the people that actually were members of the nonprofit, which are the domain name holders. So Canadians actually control CIRA and vote on who the board should be every year and what the policies are. So that was really important to us. So CIRA is a non-profit body officially, but what it really is it operates this .ca domain, which is for the public good in Canada.
When you talk about the government in those days, it was me. I was talking with my staff. We were promoting information technology and telecommunication and spectrum and the internet. We wanted to make sure that the private sector will have a free hand in this because it was a private sector kind of an activity, but it was very light government involvement in this business by design. You don't, trust me, I've been a bureaucrat for many, many years. You do not want government involved in things like this, particularly startup organization. We're not exactly agile.
We put aside our egos and really rolled up our sleeves for that first year and worked together as a unit to say, what should this look like? What are the policies? What should the board look like? We wrote the bylaws.
So we wanted to move fast, and we decided that a comfort letter would do the trick. A comfort letter it's a non-legal paper, but it makes you comfortable that you're interested, but we have to do the due diligence later on. The fact that it came from the government, the lawyers will argue that I, as a senior official, carry a little bit more weight, but it was a letter that designed to launch the industry and to set up the registry.
The Binder letter includes a number of potential guiding principles that CIRA should operate by. And even though it was written back in 1999, to this day, I and others in the space refer to that letter to reference it for guidance. How was the internet community thinking about .ca at the time? And it was incredibly prescient.
The nice thing about the letter was not that I wrote it, it's the fact that the industry, everybody, all the players, agreed with it. I didn't sign it until there was a consensus. So everybody who was a player at the time agreed with the concept and agreed with the terms. It does not mean that the board of directors of CIRA cannot go and adjust, modify, improve some of the aspects, but even they would be wise to consult before doing major changes. So I'm actually pleased that it's been a big success story to date.
Every brand new tech organization needs an initial CEO. And Bernard Turcotte, or Bernie, was CIRA's first CEO.
When we appointed Bernie Turcotte the CEO, he really was tasked with building the databases, building the systems, getting the registrars signed up.
We launched into the creation of this with about 6 contractors and myself, and over the period of 6 to 8 months from scratch, developed the CIRA platform.
We needed a business plan, we needed staff, we needed office space. We had all of these ordinary things that needed to be done, and we also needed to create the new registry, but do it in such a way that there be a smooth transition from the initial registry to the new one. So you probably heard the analogy of changing the engine on an airplane while it's flying. Well, this was sort of like that, except it was more like transferring the passengers from a Cessna to a 737 while they're both flying.
Incredibly enough, for this kind of a small team, we actually launched and had very few problems, which is impressive considering we didn't even have the official platforms on which we would be running the application when we were developing it. Everything was going on at the same time, so it's almost like building the bridge as you're going across the river. And then we started getting ready for the sunrise. The sunrise is basically when you open a registry for the first time, there is a gold rush, if you will, mentality of people trying to get the hot domains, right? Hotels.ca or ski.ca. We actually had to build in another system on top of the registry system to handle the sunrise period, because when you open that gate, basically there is so much demand that people can actually crash everything, and then you're not going to go through, you're not going to have a successful launch. It was a very long night when we actually opened the registrations. But again, the system generally held together. We started with 2 people, myself and Ron Harbottle, and 7 contractors developing all the technical infrastructure so we could run it, to a point where we had offices, accounting, payroll, 50 employees, a running registry that was profitable. I think we were one of the registries that probably led the way. I mean, we enforced presence requirements, we put in privacy requirements, we leveled the playing field with our round robin for registrations, and participated in the creation of ICANN. So I think we had done a lot, and I was very heartened that after I left, Byron took over and has been taking it from that point on, and I think the baby was in pretty good shape and could be allowed to grow.
CIRA's come a long way since the dawn of internet time in Canada. At the turn of the millennium, we had approximately 60,000 .ca domain names. We were less than 20 people. Now we have over 3 million .ca domain names. We're over 100 people. And we have technology sites around the world to support .ca. CIRA's mission is to provide a safe, stable, and secure domain name space for all Canadians by ensuring that we have a world-class registry platform, world-class DNS infrastructure, and a highly secure environment, in addition to providing funding and grants and expertise to the internet community in Canada.
For all Canadians, what they do that they may not realize is, they operate this for them, and they have brought this to, the average Canadian can register a .ca domain now easily and simply. Even a Canadian with a great idea over dinner to be able to go to a registrar and say, hey, let me see if the domain's available. Yes, it is. Okay. I like to say that everybody has great ideas, but we help entrepreneurs bring them to life, and .ca certainly is a part of that.
The .ca domain name has grown to become a critical part of the infrastructure for Canada, the communications infrastructure, and I might go so far as to say a critical fabric that helps bind the country together.
Internet is internet. Things are moving with lightning speed. Look, we have not yet figured out to do taxation of business on the internet. We have not figured out yet to do how far are we going to protect the privacy of domain name, and what are the solutions. The solutions are not simple, and now that the internet is so pervasive, it'll require global solutions. So that's where CIRA can play, at least the Canadian side, the Canadian role.
There were all kinds of folks who were deeply involved at the outset of CIRA. We worked with some great folks from government in the early days that included people like Len St-Aubin, Bill Graham, Heather Dryden, and then there were some of the early chairs of the CIRA board were really critical to the long-term success of CIRA. I mean, those are some of the original pioneers, and of course that include Maureen Cubberley, who was CIRA's first operating chair. There was Deborah Rosati, and Paul Anderson also made really important changes to CIRA that changed the trajectory of the organization. And of course, some of our board members, Dr. Michael Geist, well-known law professor and expert on internet governance and internet law, and left an indelible mark on the CIRA board and the CIRA organization, and more broadly on internet policy in Canada. I'm excited and proud to come in to work at CIRA every day. We have built one of the best internet registries in the world, literally. Incredible infrastructure, incredible people, amazing multi-stakeholder model that allows all Canadians to have a voice in how we operate the .ca domain name space. And the rest of the world recognizes that.